I was in the laundry room, folding towels, the hum of the dryer filling the quiet like a steady heartbeat. The steam curled around me, carrying the faint scent of fabric softener, wrapping the room in false warmth. In my hands, I held a bright red towel, soft and heavy, the kind you only use during the holidays when guests are around. That's when I heard it, words no mother should ever hear. My son's voice, lowered but sharp, drifting through the door, left slightly ajar. He said the best Christmas gift he could imagine would be if I were gone, if I died. For a moment, I froze. The towel slipped in my hands, suddenly heavier than stone. I waited, almost praying I had misheard, or that a laugh would follow, some hint of a cruel joke. But there was no laughter. Instead, silence settled in, pressing harder against me than the words themselves. In that silence, I heard something else: agreement, or at least the absence of protest. The house around me seemed to shift. The warm hum of the dryer, the cinnamon candle flickering in the hall, the faint sound of my grandchildren's laughter from upstairs. Suddenly, it all felt hollow, like a staged set masking a cold truth. This was supposed to be my home too, a place of family and love. But in that instant, I realized I was nothing more than an unwanted shadow in their story. My name is Linda Matthews. I'm 62 years old, a widow living in Ohio. My son Andrew is 36, married to Melissa, and together they have 3 beautiful children. Those children are my joy, my reason to keep giving. Yet standing in that laundry room, clutching a towel that felt heavier than grief, I couldn't escape the piercing thought my only child wished me gone. I stumbled back to my room, my heart racing, the echo of his words chasing me down the hallway. Was I really nothing but a burden? Did every sacrifice I made mean so little? That night marked the beginning of a reckoning I never saw coming. And to understand why those words cut so deeply, you need to know what came before the years of giving, the choices that brought me into that house, and the sacrifices I thought were made in love. When I look back, I can trace the steps of how I slowly gave pieces of myself away. After my husband passed, I held on to our small home, the one we built together, filled with memories of simpler times. But when Andrew and Melissa wanted a bigger house for their growing family, I told myself it was only natural for me to help. I sold that home, my last tie to the life I once shared with my husband, and handed them the money. It was more than a check. It was my future, my safety net, my sense of belonging. I convinced myself it was an investment in love, in family, in them. It didn't stop there. When Andrew lost his job, I quietly canceled the cruise I had saved for, tucking the ticket stubs away in a drawer. The money I had planned to spend on seeing the world became the money that kept their lights on. I told myself there would always be another time for me. When Melissa dreamed of upgrading the kitchen, I pitched in without being asked. My savings trickled away. Not all at once, but in steady sacrifices that felt like second nature. I became more than a mother. I was the babysitter, the bill payer, the steady pair of hands carrying groceries up their steps each week. I remember rocking the grandchildren to sleep, listening to their soft breathing while Melissa enjoyed nights out. I didn't complain. I thought this was love in action. I thought this was what family did for each other. But little by little, I began to notice something missing. Gratitude never came, not even in small gestures. No thank you notes, no acknowledgement, no sense that my giving meant anything at all. What I told myself was devotion began to feel like invisibility. I was always there, filling the gaps, yet rarely seen. Love is supposed to be a current, flowing back and forth. But mine only went one way, out of me, draining slowly. And I started to feel the weight of it, the heaviness of being the giver no one remembered to love back. As I folded another load of laundry one December night, that thought lingered. Love without appreciation isn't love at all. It's a burden. It happened in an instant, and yet the moment stretched endlessly. I was standing in the laundry room, folding a red towel still warm from the dryer, when Andrew's voice carried through the cracked door. He thought I couldn't hear him. He thought I was tucked away, invisible, as I always was. His words landed like a blow I never expected. The best Christmas gift would be if I were dead. At first, I couldn't breathe. The towel slipped from my hands, pooling at my feet like a piece of my heart dropped onto the cold tile. I waited for the sound of laughter, for some clumsy attempt at humor to soften the cruelty. Instead, there was only silence, a silence so thick it pressed against my chest. And then, Melissa's voice calm, casual, like she was agreeing about what groceries to buy, not about my existence. She said it wasn't her idea, but she didn't reject it either. That absence of protest cut deeper than the words themselves. I stood frozen, the hum of the dryer suddenly deafening, the faint cinnamon scent from the kitchen turning sour in my throat. Upstairs, the grandchildren's laughter rang out, innocent and pure, unaware of the poison being spoken below. I thought of how many nights I had rocked them to sleep, how many mornings I had packed their lunches, how often I had put myself last so they could have more. And yet, to their parents, I was nothing but a burden. It wasn't just Andrew's words that broke me, it was what they revealed. Years of sacrifices, invisible and unacknowledged, suddenly redefined. Every canceled trip, every dollar handed over, every meal cooked without thanks became proof that my love had been one-sided. I had given and given, believing it would one day be enough. That night, I realized it never was. I stumbled back to my room, my knees weak, my hands trembling as though they no longer belonged to me. The in-law suite they had offered me was supposed to be a gesture of generosity. Yet looking around at its bare walls and dated curtains, I saw it for what it was, a reminder that I was a guest in my own family's home, unwanted, unloved. But beneath the ache, something else stirred. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first, like the flicker of a match in the dark. The realization that I could not stay invisible forever. If Andrew truly wished me gone, then perhaps it was time to give him what he asked for, but on my own terms. That thought, fragile but steady, carried me into the days that followed. It became the seed of something I hadn't felt in years, determination. And soon, I would discover the betrayal ran even deeper than cruel words. The morning after I overheard Andrew's words, I found myself drifting toward the small desk in my in-law suite. My hands were shaking as I pulled open a drawer stuffed with old envelopes. For years I had avoided looking too closely. I told myself I trusted him, that he and Melissa were responsible adults who only leaned on me when necessary. But something in me, raw and unsettled, pushed me to look. The first envelope I opened carried the mortgage company's logo. The paper felt dry, rough against my fingertips. 3 months past due. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment the room tilted. This house, the house I had given up my own home to help buy, was sliding toward foreclosure. I had believed I was securing a future for all of us. Instead, It was teetering on the edge of collapse. I forced myself to keep digging. I opened my laptop, a machine I rarely touched. The screen lit up with numbers that betrayed me. The joint account, the one I had created years ago for emergencies, was nearly empty. Line after line, week after week, I saw withdrawals. Not hundreds, thousands. The money hadn't vanished all at once. It had bled away slowly, quietly, while I smiled at family dinners and thought my sacrifices were gifts. My stomach churned as I scrolled. My hand pressed against my chest to steady the pounding ache. They hadn't come to me in desperation. They hadn't asked. They had simply taken, over and over, as if I were nothing more than an endless well. I remembered every time I had filled their pantry, slipping grocery bags into cupboards while Melissa scrolled on her phone. Every bill I covered when Andrew was just short this month. Every night I told myself love was enough. But now, staring at those numbers, I saw the truth. Love had become allowance. Sacrifice had turned into exploitation. Downstairs, I could hear them talking, voices low and tense. Melissa mentioned my other account, the one I used for Christmas gifts. Andrew said he didn't want to steal from me, but his tone held no conviction. Just weariness, calculation, the absence of outrage. My chest tightened. Even now, after everything, they were still circling, still looking for what else they could take. I leaned back in my chair, the mortgage notice spread out before me, the bank statements glowing cold on the screen. The numbers told a story far harsher than any words I'd overheard. This wasn't just a family falling short. This was theft cloaked in the language of love. And yet, beneath the nausea, something steadier began to rise. Betrayal this deep doesn't just break you, it forces you to see clearly. And soon, I would uncover a truth they never expected me to find. I remember pulling open the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a stack of old folders, edges yellowing, the paper dusted with time. I lifted one and felt the faint grit against my fingertips, the kind of grit that carries memory. At first, I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe proof I had once mattered. Some trace of my life beyond being their safety net. What I found was something far greater. Tucked between faded letters and envelopes was a folder marked in my late husband Richard's handwriting. His script was neat, deliberate Plan B. My heart squeezed at the sight of it. I hadn't read those words in years. Inside were documents I'd almost forgotten existed, notarized agreements, co-ownership deeds, letters from our attorney. I skimmed through them, my pulse quickening, until my eyes landed on the line that stopped me cold. My name, still printed, still valid. I still legally owned 40% of this house. For years, Andrew had told me he would take care of the paperwork, that he would file the transfer. I had trusted him. I thought family didn't need safeguards. But here it was, undeniable proof that my husband had been right. Richard had always insisted we keep copies of everything. Trust people with your heart, not with your money, he used to tell me. I'd laughed back then, dismissing it as cynicism. Now, with the papers trembling in my hands, I heard his voice not as warning, but as protection. I sat back, the documents spread across the desk, the air heavy with dust and memory. Beneath the grief and betrayal, something inside me shifted. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I had leverage. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering for a moment before dialing a number I hadn't called in ages. When Sophia, our old family attorney, answered. Her voice brought a flood of relief. I explained what I'd found, my voice thin but steady. She listened, then assured me the truth: the deed was still valid. Andrew had never filed the removal. I still had rights. Her words wrapped around me like armor. All those years of sacrifice, of being drained and dismissed, I still had a piece of myself that was mine. That night, I packed a small suitcase, not frantically, not in fear, but with careful resolve. Each folded sweater, each tucked away memory felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Andrew had wished me gone, and soon, he would get his wish, but not the way he imagined. Christmas Eve arrived draped in a false kind of beauty. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon candles. The artificial pine tree glowed in the corner of the living room, and carols played faintly from a speaker. But beneath that thin layer of festivity, cracks were already spreading. By mid-morning, the first tremor hit. The lights flickered once, then went out entirely. The dishwasher groaned to a stop. The refrigerator's steady hum died, and suddenly, the whole house sank into darkness. I sat upstairs in my room, still and quiet, while the storm began below. Andrew's voice carried up the stairwell, sharp and panicked. He was on the phone, pacing, cursing under his breath. Melissa's voice followed, shrill with disbelief. They argued about the power company, about missed payments, about who was supposed to handle what. Their words overlapped, rising and falling like waves crashing against rock. I stayed where I was, calm. I knew what had landed in their inboxes that morning: the notice of intent to sell. Drafted and sent by Sophia, the attorney who had once been Richard's confidant. That email was the spark that ignited everything. For years, I had been their quiet safety net, the invisible hand keeping this house standing. Now, for the first time, I had stepped back, and the collapse was beginning. From my room, I could hear Melissa slam cupboard doors, muttering that this couldn't be happening, that her mother was flying in tomorrow, that Christmas was ruined. Andrew's voice cracked under the weight of excuses and blame. He tried to shift responsibility, but the truth was written all over their panic. They had built their life on money that was never theirs to claim. I opened my suitcase slowly, folding sweaters with careful hands. There was no rush. While chaos unraveled below, I found peace in routine. Each item I packed was a quiet declaration I was done paying. I was done disappearing. The storm reached my door by late afternoon. Melissa burst into the room without knocking, her perfume sharp, her face flushed with anger and fear. She demanded to know what I had done, why the mortgage and utilities were collapsing all at once. For years, I might have stammered, apologized, tried to fix it, but this time, I met her eyes with steady calm. I told her the truth in the simplest words I could manage. They had built their life on a foundation I paid for, and I was done paying. For a moment, she stared at me, stunned into silence. Then she turned and slammed the door behind her, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Their voices rose again, frantic and jagged, but I no longer carried the weight of it. The house was cold now, the darkness settling in with the winter air. Yet for me, the silence was no longer suffocating. It was clarity. While Andrew and Melissa scrambled in panic, I felt lighter than I had in years. I zipped my suitcase shut and rested my hand on it. Tomorrow, before dawn, I would be gone. They would wake to find me vanished, just as Andrew once wished, but not in the way he imagined. The house was still when I slipped downstairs on Christmas morning. The tree glowed faintly, its lights powered by a small backup generator, but the rest of the home sat in silence. I carried my small suitcase in one hand and, in the other, 3 carefully wrapped packages, each one marked for a grandchild. I bent slowly, placing them beneath the branches, tucking a handwritten letter into each. I wanted them to know that my love was never absent, even if I no longer stood in the same room. Love, I realized, could travel farther than walls, beyond distance, and through time itself. The air was cold, and the hardwood floors chilled my feet as I walked toward the door. My breath fogged the glass when I paused at the entryway. Looking back once more, I didn't linger. I had already spent too many years standing still in doorways, waiting to be seen. Outside, snow crunched beneath my boots. The world hushed beneath a pale moon. The shuttle pulled up just as I reached the curb, its headlights glowing like an invitation. I climbed inside, closed my eyes, and let the quiet engine carry me away. On the plane, I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the earth slip away beneath me. Hours later, when the announcement came that we had landed in Paris, I felt something stir inside me, a mix of fear, wonder, and relief. Stepping into the crisp morning air of a new city, I didn't feel like a woman running away. I felt like someone finally walking toward herself. I've come to understand that love without respect is not love at all. For years, I thought sacrifice alone could hold a family together. But when love turns into obligation and care is mistaken for servitude, the heart begins to break. Walking away was not abandonment. It was the first step toward honoring myself. True family does not see you as a burden. True love does not silence or diminish you. If my story resonates with you, hold fast to your worth, protect it fiercely, and if this touched your heart, share it, comment, or simply pass it forward.